Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Marvin L. Storm. Marvin L. Storm has founded, acquired, and scaled businesses over the past 4 decades. He hosts the Business Exit Stories podcast, where he interviews M&A advisors and other transaction professionals who share stories of their deals for those who are thinking about selling their businesses. He serves on numerous company boards of directors, consults on exit strategies, and is a frequent speaker, exit coach, author, and podcaster. Welcome to the podcast, Marvin.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
I am too. And I was reading your story, and it's quite interesting, and I'd love for you to share it with everyone else. So, how did you get to do what you're doing now?
Well, I spent most of my career, I started out, in the accounting world. I got my degree in accounting and went to work for a large national firm, what would be called one of the big four today. And I grew up in an entrepreneurial home. My father had his own business, and my mom was the bookkeeper, and I watched the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial lifestyle. And my dad, not having a deep education from a classroom perspective, but grew up on a ranch and, learned, how to be independent and want to kind of sail his own ship. And so after that kind of entrepreneurial DNA imprinted, after spending some time in the accounting world, I got the itch, and I played pickup basketball with a bunch of guys on every Tuesday night for several years. And one thing led to another, and a couple of us got to chatting, and eventually two of us turned in our resignations and rented a small office and had two desks and a phone facing each other, and we were in business. And so we launched and grew a business from a couple of guys to, a couple of floors in the downtown office space and 60, 70 people, and had a good run. And it was exciting. I was young, had at the time, a couple of kids, and, just experience what most entrepreneurs experience out there, scratching your head sometimes how you're going to meet payroll and overcoming those obstacles. But the world changes, and my partner and my co-founder and myself, objectives kind of changed. And we came to a point where we decided we'd exit and step away from that business. And I went right, he went left, and I got involved in acquired another company, and grew that company. And a few years ago, stepped away. And after so many years being in the fast lane, I thought it would be nice to be in the slow lane, and that's kind of what I thought I would do. But gee, after spending some time in that slow lane, it wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be. And I just got to thinking about, all of the experiences I'd had in my career, and the couple of exits that I had. And I love podcasting. I listen to a lot of podcasts every day, literally every day. And I got thinking, maybe I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that have, businesses, and they're going to face the decision of how to, kind of sell or exit their business. And the last exit that I had, was different, as I think anytime you walk away or step aside from a business, that transition tends to be different, because entrepreneurs, people that own and run businesses, they become really good at what they do because they do it every day, and they continue to hone those skills and refine them until they're, at the top of their game. They're really good at what they do. But when it comes to selling and stepping away from a business, you don't do that too many times in a career. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And that was kind of the situation with me, as I think it is for a lot of folks. And I got to thinking about that and said, since a lot of entrepreneurs out there, hundreds of thousands, several million actually, at some time are going to have to figure out what they're going to do with their business. And that may be passing it on to someone in the family. It may be a group of employees or a management team or selling it to a third party, someone you don't know. Whatever that decision is, they're going to have to cross that bridge at some point in time. And I thought, if I would have had a little bit more insight and knowledge into what the process was going to be like, especially on my last exit, where I had outside investors, private equity involved. I had boards of directors, and that was kind of a different world for me. And so, yeah, it worked out okay, but it could have been a lot better, I think. And I thought, well, I'm going to have a podcast that'll talk about making it a lot better, and sharing ideas and tips. And so what I did is I decided that I would not really interview the entrepreneurs that sold their business, but the deal makers, the uh, investment bankers, the M&A specialists, the business brokers, CPAs, the people that are involved in kind of that transaction flow of helping entrepreneurs monetize their business and sell them. And that's really turned out to be something really interesting and intriguing, because all these professionals, they bring their good, their bad, their ugly stories to the table of how things either worked out or didn't work out for those people that were selling their business and exiting, and some of the takeaways of why it didn't go well and why it did, and what people can learn from that process. So that's what I'm doing today. It's kind of turned into, I just love kind of giving back and working with people that have spent decades, if not a lifetime, building up a business, and they look to step away and retire and enjoy some of the fruits of their labors. And you want to make sure that there's a lot of fruit to enjoy, not an empty basket, And so it's been very enjoyable, and I get a chance to meet a lot of great people and do some coaching and some mentoring of people, giving them some tips and insights on what they need to do to monetize all that hard work over the period of time. So let's really enjoy this.
Yeah, and I remember when I was first starting a business and I had young children, um, you know, 7, 6, 3, something like that. And finding a way to balance my life and still feed that drive. Most entrepreneurs, they have this drive to succeed. And sometimes, the family gets put a little bit to the side, and sometimes, the business gets put a little aside. As you were going through those years of building your business initially, how did you um, arrange your life so that you could spend time with your kids and build your business?
Well, there's the trick for entrepreneurs. I've often looked at life as kind of like seasons of your life. You have your formative years, which is kind of the springtime, and then you have where you get your education, you launch off into your career, or in some cases starting a business, and you know that's kind of the summer, and where you scale and grow professionally and personally. And it's generally during that time that you start a family and have other responsibilities. And the real trick is to, as you say, is to balance that. And there were times that I didn't do a great job at it because, you know, I was had a lot of other responsibilities outside of the business, not only my family, but I was involved in my church and in the community, and things were going well, and I had 5 kids, and I had a great wife who you know really helped through that process. And if I had to look back, I probably would have changed the flow of my days, although I had a lot of, well, I thought I had a lot of control over my time, but with a lot of competing interests for that. And I did a lot of traveling. My business required me to do a lot of traveling, which dramatically changes the complexion when you spend weeks away from home and on the road and living out of a suitcase,
Mm.
um, it becomes really a challenge. And so, for all of those out there that are kind of in that summer of your life and you're balancing all those different priorities in your life, if I could do anything in my life over again, I would probably make sure that I blocked out a lot more time than I did for family activities. Um, if you were to talk to my children today, I think they would say that the one thing that was missing from their life was more time with dad. Although I was there for a lot of the time, um, their perception is that there was a lot of other things going on, and they sort of felt guilty for encroaching on that time because I was up early. I came home late a lot of times, and it is the biggest challenge for an entrepreneur and those that are building a career not to shortchange that, because it does go by in a flash. I mean, now I have 5 kids that are great kids. They have their own families. I have grandkids now.
Mhm.
And I see the challenges that my kids are facing as they're now in the summer of their lives. And I put in my 2 cents once in a while on slow down sometimes, smell the roses, although they're much better at it than I was, because I think from their experiences, they made the commitment that they would make their family feel somewhat like they felt. And but they turned out great because they had a great mom.
All right. And then, you mentioned one of your responsibilities was church. And how does faith play a part in your life as far as success in life, success in your personal life, success at business? What does faith have to do with it?
Well, for me, just speaking personally, it was the foundational anchor, because in careers or in being in business or an entrepreneur, things don't always go as planned. And I've had some actually spectacular over the fence home runs in business, where I did exceptionally well. And sometimes I got to believing my own press clippings, that I was the reason for all of my, success, which wasn't true actually. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I've often used the metaphor of a surfer. A surfer's out on the ocean and he has his surfboard and he's got his wetsuit on and he's paddling on his board and he's waiting for the wave. And you know, the experience of riding the wave is really determined not necessarily by what he does, but by the size of the wave.
Mhm.
And if he can ride that wave, he has a great time. But he isn't the reason that the ride was all that great. It's the size of the wave. And so I happened to be early in my career at the right place at the right time, and the wave came along. And I was smart enough to get up. Me and my partner were smart enough to get up on that surfboard, and we rode that wave. And it's exhilarating. It's intoxicating because you seem to be doing all the right things. And then when the wave goes away and the market changes, in my case, and competition comes in, and the world is a little bit different because of recessions and things like that come galloping along that you don't really experience as a young person in business. You haven't gone through those life experiences yet, and then all of a sudden the waves stop, and you can't quite figure out what you're doing wrong. Why is this so hard all of a sudden? And it's then, I think, when you have a chance to be reflective, and if you don't have that anchor in your life of your faith, and that there's something a little bit more bigger picture than what's happening to you at the time. I went from riding the wave into doing very well, and then starting another business when my partner and I sort of went our different ways. I started another business, and that was a much harder slog. And it was during those times that having this other dimension in my life served to level out, my confidence in myself, and that uh, it wasn't all about how much money you made. It wasn't all about how big of a business you built. It was really more about what you were accomplishing with your family. And that's when, that learning to serve others, learning to uh, work with those that actually have a whole lot less than you do. And I had those opportunities. I had opportunities not only to work with those that, were struggling in their own personal situations, but with a lot of youth. And, it was kind of in that period of time, I was in my 30s, mid to late 30s at that time. I'd had now some life experiences, um, and it was the actual, I've often, one of the people that I spent a lot of time with, one of the young men that I worked with at the time, just passed away a few weeks ago of cancer. And I got a chance to go up and spend almost a full day with him, and he only had several months to live. And we spend that time together, and we reminisced on the type of things that we did together. I was a scoutmaster at the time, and we did these 50-mile hikes, and we did these other activities and I was sort of a pivotal, person in his life as he was growing up. And, we had that time to share, and it's those type of experiences in my life that have brought texture to my life, that have brought meaning of, having been able to actually help somebody else along their life's journey. And, and then to have that come back around several decades later, where that relationship that you established was very meaningful to them. And, when we went to the memorial service, the funeral, and all the people that we had known from decades ago, a lot of them were there. And it was very reflective to me that, at this point in my life, which I'm kind of now in the fall and in the winter of my life, you can tell by the gray hair here, that I look back on what things that I've accomplished in my life that had any real meaning. And, being reflective, those things that did have real meaning, it wasn't the company that I sold, the amount of money that I made. It was really through the vehicle of community service and church, where you were able to give back or serve others, to help others along the way. It's those things that are now that have created some real meaning and the satisfaction in my life. When I look back now, if I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, the things that would be meaningful to me would be those type of experiences. And a lot of them are faith-based, and a lot of them are centered around the whole concept of what a Christ-like life is, and that is to serve others and help others along the way. So that's kind of what I've kind of taken away from, the winding path of my life through business and growing and selling businesses and raising a family and working with others. The things that kind of rise to the top of my life experiences are those that tend to be more focused on faith and the service of others.
That is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. I was thinking when you were talking about your long days, getting up early, being out late, sometimes long weeks, I'm sure. Did you have any morning practices or things that you did that kept you centered, on point, moving forward in a positive direction?
Well, I'm an early person. I get up early generally, and I've I generally take long walks, and that's when I listen to my podcasts. Um, I've always done that. I've always been relatively active. I mentioned that I played basketball, and so I've always been, physically active at some level. And what I found that has kind of centered and grounded me was to start the day with some sort of activity. And what I found is that I lived in an area where it was relatively rural. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we lived out in a community that I was literally a 3-minute walk into being on a trail into the East Bay Regional Park System, where you could walk for 2 days and not see anybody. And a large lake reservoir there. And so I had the opportunity to go out and walk. I'd take the dog and we'd go out and walk and for an hour or so. And now that I've moved up away from the Bay Area, I live in an area that's a lot more hilly and rural. It's called the Gold Country. If you're familiar with Northern California, it's on the way up to Lake Tahoe. A lot of oak trees and rolling hills. And so I carry on the same practice today. Every morning, or sometimes I have early activities. I do it in the late afternoon, but it's always that time where I can spend some quiet time, either reflecting or learning, and listening to high quality content of others on various topics, from more spiritually based to personal improvement to business related topics that are of interest to me. So it's caused me to that practice has lasted decades, and it's kept my blood pressure a lot lower to have those non-stressful times to just be with yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, they say that you should plan with the end in mind, so when, let's say there's some young people, they want to start a business. And you know how when you're starting a business, you're all excited and you're not really thinking about 10 years down the road, especially as a young person, you're just thinking how exciting it's going to be to go live and start doing business. So what would be your best advice for people who are just starting out? How to start with the end in mind?
Well, that's actually a great question to ask, because I often get the question, I'm so busy building my business, I don't have time to think about what I'm going to do 10, 15 years down the road when I decide to sell it. That's generally the sentiment and the thought process. And I get it. I went down that path. And if there's anything that I would do differently from a business perspective, is that I would be a little bit more strategic in the whole process. Because most entrepreneurs that get started in business, they either bootstrap it, or they have an idea, or they fall into it, or somehow, and there's not a lot of strategic thought into launching a business and how it's all going to end up. But I can tell you from experience, and especially as I'm talking and interviewing these deal makers, the people that are going to eventually help those type of people at one point in time transition out of their business, that those that do start thinking early, generally it's not a lot of people actually start a business with the end in mind. There are some that may be real exceptions to the rule and real strategic thinkers. And it's generally the people that have been through 1 or 2 business iterations before, have had an exit before. When they start their next venture, they've had experience. And so they're much more thoughtful on their exit strategy than first timers, people that are just launching a business, their first or second business. And so you have these categories of people. But I can tell you, regardless of what category you are in, that the earlier you start to be reflective on how you're going to monetize all that hard work, the better you're going to be. The more you're going to walk away that actually goes into your pocket when you step away from your business. I can say that for an absolute certainty. Now, you may be lucky that you're again in the right place at the right time when you decide to sell your business, and you may just time it right and you have a home run when you sell your business. But the statistics and data do not support that as a great strategy. Luck is not a great strategy. And so what I would say for those that are listening in here today is that the sooner, if you have a business, the sooner you start thinking about how am I going to get out of this business, because I found time and time again that people will spend a lot of time thinking about how to get into a business or a new product or service they're going to launch. They'll do a lot of market research. They'll spend time with consultants and whatever have you to figure out what they're going to do. But they spend virtually no time in thinking about how they're going to monetize all that hard work and how they're going to exit the business. That's just an anomaly in, entrepreneurial, thought process. Entrepreneurs become really good at what they do, as I've mentioned, but you only go through a business exit once or twice, so you really don't know what you don't know. So you think you're just going to figure it out on the fly. And sometimes that doesn't work very well. In fact, most of the times it doesn't work very well because you don't optimize that exit value. So what I would say is that starting with the end in mind, the sooner you get to the point where you actually start thinking about some general parameters around how that is going to happen in the future. Now, I can tell you that it'll probably never work out the way that you originally envisioned it. Too many things happen. Things change, economies go up and down. Things happen in life, it just happens, and you'll have to change it. But if you've put the ball in motion and you're moving toward that goal, you're much further ahead than waiting until the last minute. I'm actually writing a book, kind of based on this concept, is that, and I'm using the metaphor of a parachute. Pilots do not pack a parachute when the engines are on fire. They have that parachute packed in advance. And so if and when they need that parachute, it is ready to go. And so if you kind of think of that in business terms, starting that thought process of how you're going to step away from your business and exit at some point in time, if you get that, start packing that parachute and have it ready at some point in time, if the unexpected were to happen, that means you go to the doctor and you get a bad diagnosis. You have a problem with a partner. The economy has a downturn. Competitors come into the marketplace, or you just simply get burned out. If you have that parachute ready to go and packed, you're in a much better and stronger position to get to where you need to be, because a lot of things have already been done. And, packing your parachute or getting your business ready for an exit isn't rocket science necessarily. It's just that generally it's put off far too long. And so when you actually need to grab that parachute and, head to the exit, you're stuffing the parachute into the end of the pack, and those type of scenarios don't work out very well. When you make that exit, you hope when you pull the ripcord, it opens, and so, if you just start that process early, you're going to be in a much stronger position to translate the value you've created into dollars and cents when you exit.
Makes sense. As you're talking about, entrepreneurs get really good at what they do. And I'm in the medical space, and I know passing medical practice from doctor to doctor, it's always, they want the older doctor to stay until people get used to the new doctor. But, the doctor thinks he's the best doctor. And, so when he goes to sell the business, there's no business once he's gone. So what's the best way for businesses to make sure that the business continues after it's sold or passed on?
Well, that's a great point that you make. It depends on the type of business naturally, but the best way for even a doctor or a personal services professional, accountants, attorneys, and people like that, if they can make their business or their practice more than just about them, so it doesn't necessarily all depend on themselves, then they've really created something beyond the value of what they bring to the business. And so one of the key concepts is kind of creating a hierarchy of management, where and really the way to test this out is if you're the entrepreneur that makes things happen, you need to kind of look for that operations person or that person that's a general manager or someone that allows you to actually go on a vacation and the business can continue without you for a week or two or a month or whatever. And once you've kind of reached that first stepping stone of you being able to be away from the business and the business continuing, regardless of the type of business that you have, if the business can continue to generate revenue while you're not there, you've made that first step on creating real intrinsic value in your business. And then the next step and the next step, and then you keep adding people that allow you to become less relevant to the success of the business. And so when you can accomplish that, then you really have created enterprise value in your business. Now, that can be at different levels. It really depends on how committed you are to it and on how much enterprise value you really want to create. It's not going to happen overnight. The most difficult thing an entrepreneur ever does in his career in running and scaling a business is finding good people that they can mentor, they can train, and that they can, pass the baton to certain parts of their business on. And what they will find eventually is that those people they've recruited, if they've been thoughtful recruiting and thoughtful training and mentoring, that those folks will actually do a better job than the entrepreneur will do in most aspects of the business. Now, the entrepreneur obviously brings certain talents to the table that are very difficult to replace. And he may always be involved in the business, whether it's in the sales and marketing or client relationships or on the research and development side or whatever. He will always be a valuable contributor, but the ability to create the management hierarchy is where enterprise value is created. And so when it comes time to exit them, you have a whole different classification of buyers. If you're the owner operator that is the focal point of the business, nothing really happens. If you go on vacation, everything kind of goes into slow motion. If that's kind of the business that you've built, then the type of buyers that you're going to look for your business is a relatively small pool because you're looking to replace yourself in that role. And quite frankly, that's a very small universe of buyers. And it's sometimes very difficult and challenging to find those type of buyers. If you've made that first step up where you're important to the business, but you aren't essential to be there every day, then you increase that universe of buyers quite a bit. So you have it's kind of four buckets of buyers that you have. You have the owner operator role, which is a smaller bucket. Then you have kind of the management role where you have a general manager or someone involved and that person would stay with the business. And then you really have kind of a hierarchy of management. And each of these buckets, that there are more and more buyers for businesses that fill those buckets. And so if you have a management, kind of that second tier bucket, you have people that, a lot more people that are interested in buying a business that is operational, that they can focus on scaling and growing the business. And these are maybe executives coming out of corporate America or people like that, or family offices that buy businesses. And then you get to that third level where you actually have a management team in place and created a lot more value. Then you have this whole another universe of financial buyers. They're the people that do this for a living. They raise money in funds called private equity, and then they go out and look for businesses they can buy to get a good return on their invested money.
Mhm.
And that's a whole nother world out there. And then you really have the last bucket, which is a big bucket. And those are buyers that look for companies that have strategic value to them. They may manufacture a widget and they may have 10,000 customers that buy their widget. But you happen to have developed a kind of widget with a twist. And it's different than their widget, but complementary to their widget. And they could see if they buy your company, that they can offer your widget to their 10,000 customers. And that adds value to what they're doing. And so it's not about necessarily the financial metrics that they're buying. They're buying your company because of the strategic fit, and that's called a strategic buyer. And I can tell you that a lot of times, not too long ago, I interviewed an M&A advisor on my podcast where he shared a story about one of his clients that had this widget, and the buyer of his company paid 10 times what he thought he was going to get for that company. He actually had buyers at the table that were this financial bucket buyer, and they were offering simply an amount based on earnings of the company. We'll say it was 3x of the earnings of the company. And that's what they were offering because they were a financial buyer. They were looking for the return on the investment. They were looking at the metrics. Well, lo and behold, there's this other classification of strategic buyers out there that saw what they were doing and that really fit nicely into what they would be able to offer their existing customer base. And two buyers came to the table that were strategic buyers. And one of those buyers didn't want the other company, who they were competitors to have that widget. They didn't want, they wanted to have the widget. And so they, in order to make sure that they got that widget, they paid literally 10 times the amount of what the original financial buyer was paying, and double what the competitor was going to pay, because it was really strategically important for them to have that widget. And so, not that that's going to happen to everyone, but the point of even raising or discussing this issue is really because none of that happens if you don't give some thought, because that was able to happen because the entrepreneur had built this management hierarchy that they weren't essential to the business, and that they could acquire that business and that business could continue without the entrepreneur being there. And so they moved up this hierarchy of management to where they positioned themselves to be of interest to a strategic buyer out there. And they happened to be in the right place at the right time too. And that just enhanced the return. But the thing that I think your audience should take away here is that none of this happens if you don't at some point in time start thinking about how you're going to get out of the business and what some of the things you need to do to position yourselves to optimize your exit, so you can convert some of all that hard work and sweat equity and all the time that you've put in, you can translate that into dollars when you actually sell the business.
Okay, so let's say we've gotten to the point, it's time to exit, it's time to sell or pass it on. Who are the players? And if you could kind of define them too, because M&A, I know what M&A is, but some of the listeners might not know what that is.
Mhm.
So who are the players and what part do they play?
Well, I love sports. I'm a big sports guy and I love football. Football is one of my more favorite sports. So we're in football season right now. We're talking here, recording this here. And so we're in game 8 of the NFL season, going into game 9. And so every football team has a whole bunch of coaches. It isn't just the head coach that is important to that team. They have an offensive line coach, they have defensive coaches, they have wide receiver coach, they have quarterback coaches, they have special team coaches, they have all of these different coaches that work with, you know, different parts of the team to optimize their effectiveness and their play. Well, a business is nothing more than a group of people that are on a team. And when it gets to the point where you want to, you know, if you've done the right things, you're going to, you as the head coach are going to exit and they're going to hire another head coach. You want to make sure that you have the team that's going to help you through that transition. You have the right players. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, fortunately or unfortunately, have this can-do, do-it-yourself mentality. They've always been able to figure out things on their own. You know, that's just their personality. They're problem solvers. You know, they enjoy the challenge of solving problems. And a lot of people I've talked to, entrepreneurs, think that when it comes time to exit, they'll just figure it out. You know, because that's how they've done everything else in their career. But I can tell you the complexity of exiting a business is far greater than they imagine or think. So the right approach is really to assemble your team, kind of your team of advisors that are going to help you through that process. And so one of those people that should be on your team is someone, and it may be an outside accountant or someone like that. You need someone that can advise you on the financial side of your business, because I can tell you that at some point in time, especially if you sell to people you don't know, if you're selling to a family member or an employee or management team or someone like that, they already understand the business. They may not be so concerned about the financials. But if you go to an outside third party, that becomes very important. And so you need someone there that is minding the store on the financial side of your business and can create the reports and the financial reporting that is reliable and that is trustworthy. And there aren't a lot of questions around that. And entrepreneurs, a lot of times, they use their business kind of as their own personal bank account, and they run a lot of expenses through their business and things of that nature. And that's okay. That's part of being a business owner, but there's going to come a time when those type of, taking advantage of those type of benefits from a business will work against you when it comes to creating the financial reporting that isolates those type of things and that aren't necessarily contributing to the growth of the business. And so you need to have someone on your team that is a financial person, and I don't recommend really that you try to sell your business on your own. Again, I'll go back to a story on, a transaction that an advisor on my podcast brought forward. And this is relatively recent, within the last year and a half or so. They had their business all teed up. And so if you've owned a business and you got a good business, you'll get inbound calls of people looking to buy your business, or they say they're interested in buying your business. And when I ran my business, I had those people call me all the time. And so this happened to this guy. And so he entertained it. He invited these people in and they made him an offer. And it was a good offer. And so he was doing it on his own without a lot of outside advice and counsel. And he had basically decided to accept this offer as is. And he had an attorney that was working on it. And then COVID hit. And within a matter of a couple of months, the offer went away because everyone was standing back and saying, well, we got to figure out what's happening here with COVID. And they just kind of stepped back at that point in time. Well, he'd gotten all geared up and in the frame of mind that he was going to be selling his business. And so he wanted to continue. But now there were no buyer. And so he went actually networked around and found an advisor, a business broker / M&A advisor to help him. Well, that M&A advisor came in, and after they had gone through the 6-9 months and things started to stabilize after COVID, that M&A advisor, and I'm just going to use an example, the person that showed up and wanted to buy his business offered X for the business. Well, 9 months later, the M&A advisor was able to go in and make changes and reposition the story and bring other buyers to the table that would be interested in the business, because that's what he does for a profession. And when they went back on the market, uh, he reached out to the buyer that had offered X and let them know there were three other buyers offering a lot more than X. And that same buyer came back and offered 3X for the business because he was going to get a real deal at X. But now that he knew he had competition and he really wanted the business, the M&A advisor was able to position, and get other people to the table bidding on the business that it drove the price up. So here's a situation that if COVID hadn't happened, he'd have got X and he'd have been happy with X. But now he has 3X and he's a lot happier with 3X than he was with X. And even though he paid that M&A advisor a lot of money in the fees, that was a great return on his money. So getting back to your question, you need a professional advisor, whether it's a business broker or an M&A advisor, if you've got a larger business, an investment banker type of firm that can advise you, because they just know the process, and they know people, they know who the buyers are out there. And then you really need to have someone that can help you when it comes to tax situation of how you're going to treat the taxes. And if you do a little bit of planning and preparatory work on the taxes, you can greatly minimize the impact that a capital gains tax will have on your business if you do it right.
Wonderful. So yeah, don't go it alone is what you're saying.
Well, you may get lucky to go it alone, but the chances are, the probabilities is that this is probably one of the largest financial transactions of your career and your business life. You shouldn't go into it without some real professional input. And I would say 9.9 times out of 10, the money or the fees that you pay to your professional advisors will more than pay for itself multiple times over.
Beautiful. So I'm sure there's people that would like to find the podcast and also find out about what you're doing. So at this point, why don't you tell us, how do people find you, the name of your podcast, if you have services you have available for people?
Well, sure. I think a good place for any entrepreneur out there is just to go to wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, Stitcher, just type in business exit stories. You'll find the podcast there. Just subscribe to it and just listen to all the stories. There's hundreds and hundreds of stories on the podcast of people just like you that have had good experiences exiting a business and some not so good experiences exiting a business and some real belly flops. And you certainly don't want to be in that category. So learn from the experiences of others. Don't make those mistakes yourself. I also have a kind of a report that I prepare. It's just go to the podcast website, Business Exit Stories /report 2, that's number 2. And download this report, and it'll give you kind of a big picture overview of this thought process of what you need to start thinking about when you start moving toward that eventual end of stepping away and exiting your business. And then, if you need additional, just reach out to me. You can reach me at mstorm@businessexitstories.com. I get a lot of people that are always asking me questions and wanting an advisor or wanting some tips on things, and I'm glad to provide that type of insight.
All right. Well, thank you. So now I have a personal question for you. At this point in your life, what gives you the most happiness and makes your life the best?
Well, fortunately, I have good health. I've been blessed with that, and I hope that continues. But I think the thing that gives me the most satisfaction are really two things, maybe three things in life. The older you get, and the more I think that family becomes just more important. We've talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast here and our discussions here. But now at this point in my life, kind of in the fall of my life, and I have these kids, and I have grandchildren, and they're growing, and to be a part of their lives, and to actually offer something useful and benefit, and that they actually do ask grandma and grandma a little bit about what they think on certain things. And it's just very rewarding to see your kids and grandkids go through life and experience and grow and find happiness in their own way. I have kids that have chosen different levels. Some got master's degrees, some of them didn't graduate from college but are very successful in building a business. And it's just satisfying to see how that has grown. What I'm doing right now actually has brought me a lot of satisfaction, because I've been able to use my experiences and the mistakes and the belly flops that I've had in my life, in my career, and help preclude that from helping in other people's lives, especially because a business tends to be exiting a business tends to be one of the more significant financial events in your life. And you really don't want to drop the baton on the last lap. Mm-hmm. And just to be able to help others avoid some of the mistakes, some mistakes which I've made and others have made, and just help them, that's been very gratifying to me. And then again, from a faith-based perspective, just being involved and being able to help others at different points in their lives as they go through the seasons of their lives, and to be in a position to offer support and guidance and sometimes financial assistance for people that are struggling at that point in time, and doing that through the church or the community that I live in has just been very rewarding, and having the opportunity to be in that position. So well, for me, a lot of the mistakes I made earlier in my life make this point in my life just a lot more rewarding, that I didn't really blow it in making bad decisions early on.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for being on the podcast today, and for all your wisdom. And we got into some really different topics, so it's been wonderful.
Well, I've enjoyed the discussion. You've asked some questions that have caused me to reflect, and that's a good thing. Sometimes I don't even take that time, to reflect and actually audibilize, some of my internal thoughts. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Yes. So I have one last question before we complete. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I think the best advice I could give to anyone out there, I think you find happiness when you help other people along their path. That has been true in my life. The most rewarding relationships and experiences I've had have come as a result of being able to be in a position to have helped somebody else.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again soon.